Welcome, I'm Bry the Builder, and as you can see, today I'm going to be building and weathering a 1/12 scale Bandai Star Wars SandTrooper. This is a super cool kit. I've really been looking forward to building it, more because of the weathering really than anything. The kits are great from Bandai, these 1/12 scale. I've built several of them. Here is a Stormtrooper, standard Stormtrooper that I built a while back. And these guys really are great, but really the downside to your normal Stormtrooper is that you don't really do any weathering, right? Their armor, at least in my opinion, should be clean. So they're still fun builds, right? The little weathering on the weapon there that you may or may not be able to see. But that's why I'm really looking forward to this guy. It's because there is going to be a lot of weathering on a SandTrooper. So, and I think, I'm not sure, I've been kind of messing around with the idea of doing a blue shoulder pauldron, just because that's unique and it is more for specifically snipers. But I don't have a sniper weapon for him. So with all the weathering, I think the orange is actually going to look really cool. And I know that's, I think, more for captains. And the black is more, or the orange is the highest rank in the unit. The white, and I don't see a white here, but the white is more for the middle rank, and the black is basically the grunts. But I think for me, I think contrast-wise, I think the orange is going to look the coolest, because the body's going to be pretty beat up, pretty weathered. I'm definitely going to weather more than that. Probably more like, well, maybe even a little more than what's on the box art. He's pretty weathered there. I've seen some of the online builders who've gone as far as doing like really like dark chunks almost on the armor, as though, you know, the citizens of wherever they may have been were throwing bantha poop at them. And I don't know, it's a little over the top. It's probably accurate, really. The Bandai does include some new parts. So I think this is armor that is basically the exact same as the normal Stormtrooper. And then these white parts here are new armor parts. So you get water slides and stickers. Don't tend to use the stickers for anything. I guess they're good, but I really don't want stickers to kind of peel up over time. And even with the water slides, especially for the pauldron, that's just not going to work well. I mean, it might come together. That split in there is made so that it can fit around the curve nicely. But yeah, I just don't see that happening. Paint makes a lot more sense there. And, you know, I'm sure it's not color matched perfectly, but Vallejo's model color, bright orange, is actually really close to the same orange. So I'll use that. And then for the gray bits, I'm going to actually make a custom mix between Citadel's Dawnstone and Dark Reaper. And it'll be mostly Dawnstone with a little bit of Dark Reaper in it, just to get a slightly bluish, coolish tint to it. And Dawnstone's just not quite dark enough. And then for the blue that I'm going to paint in there, I will actually use Citadel's Techless Blue. That's almost a perfect match. It's close enough. I can't really see much difference between that and the decal. So there's the shoulder pauldron. It's molded, so it's not really flexible at all. all the backpack parts. Some pretty cool bits. Now, it is a new helmet cap. Not sure what the difference is, but all these parts are molded in color. Most of this really doesn't need to be painted. The black is a nice satiny black. The weapons will all get painted. But most of the body parts that are black really don't need anything. And the armor that's white is a nice white. I really feel like it's actually pretty accurate to what would be that kind of real armor. So just leaving it this nice plastic, and then I'm going to beat it up and weather it. And then the base, you know, sand base, fine. It'll get weathered to actually look hopefully a little more like sand. And then all of the polycap type parts. That allow for all of the flexibility in the joints and the posability of these kits, which is actually pretty exceptional. So, you know, the bases aren't beautiful, but they serve a purpose. They actually have a nice little footprint molded into them. So if, depending on where you have the character, it actually does hold it in there pretty nicely. I think I may, depending, I'm not sure, actually customize this and give it a nice kind of sand texture. And if I do that, I'll probably not use the sand or the foot mold, but use the sand version and actually glue it in and just texture the whole thing together. And just make sure there's a couple spots in there that are nice and flat for his feet to stand on. All right, so the instructions are pretty straightforward with these kits, right? So as we open it up, right, we go to page 1, but there's some nice color part. That's the new backpack options. I believe that for the version that I'm going to do, I think the A-type backpack, I think, is the coolest layout. There's not really that much difference between them. There's kind of a standard backpack frame, really, and then there's some optional like locations for different pieces. So there's not a whole lot of difference there, but I'm gonna go with A. So, and I will actually do some detail work and get that to actually have those, like, you know, edges at least pop out so you can see all the stuff that's going on there. Whether or not it's completely screen accurate, I'm not overly concerned. I want all that detail to show. So then really straightforward, right? It's like simple piece at a time, and then you just basically assemble the head, torso, hips, legs, arms, and then just kind of put it all together as you go. And once it's all together is when we'll do a little bit of painting and weathering. So let's get started. All right, so as far as the belt components go, there are options between how the belt component and the pack on the shoulder will end up being. The instructions recommend, I believe, to have the long, thin pack on the belt and the smaller pack with the little side pack up on the shoulder. And if it's not what it's recommending, that's what we're going to do. Because otherwise, the little side pack will get in the way of the actual big backpack that goes on his back. So, as we work through this, we're going to be looking to make sure we use the long, skinny, C48. That's the one that is called out here for the belt. And then C49 with C50 for up on the shoulder. It's not the best connection. I definitely don't love how it looks right there. I may end up actually filling and puttying that, but I don't know. It's probably not too noticeable. These waistband pieces may end up needing to be glued on, depending on how they actually do. That might be better. And once the rest of the belt pieces are on, they might help lock it in place. So far, looking pretty good though. Rounding off the edges on there. I'm going to paint these to be more like a deep dark brown beat leather. So that, and same with the pack on the shoulder. That should actually help. The roundness should help make it look even more weathered. Well, that is going to limit the posability a bit, but I think that's okay. There's going to be plenty of stuff this guy's going to be able to do. It's not like he's really an action figure. So once he's all weathered and posed, we'll find a really good spot where his arm won't affect how his head is actually positioned. Otherwise, that is the main body build through step 10. So, alright, time to build a backpack. Well, depending on a couple of things, I might
want to end up kind of gluing that down, or maybe I'll just hit it with the heat gun and let it sag down a little bit. I'm not sure. I don't know. I can always pop the backpack back off, right? And I'll bend this a little bit more so it holds to the shoulder a little bit better. I don't like how it's popping up. But backpack looks pretty cool. It's going to look really cool once it's all weathered. All right, next is weapons. Alright, so now I actually have just a little bit of water, and I'm going to put in a little bit of Gorilla Wood glue. Probably going to mix quite a bit more than I actually need. Because really, I mean, after we spend all the time weathering this guy, this as a sand texture really just not going to be okay. So we are going to, let's really crappy brush. Let's go with this one. We are going to cover our sand base with actual sand. Now, I couldn't get sand that was sand color, so I got gray, assuming that will actually make for a nice, I guess, base color to paint into a sand color. Now, it is also entirely possible that this is going to take a couple coats, but something like this is far less expensive than your standard. Let's see, we're going to put down try. Should just have like a paper plate. But at least with this, missing that off of a weapon somewhere, I'll be able to reclaim most of the sand that I don't use. And now I do wish I had just a simple little scooper. Make this work better. Now, I'm kind of assuming that this is going to become a sloppy mess. Which is why I want to do this with a crappy brush. And I'll probably be able to rinse most of the sand out of the brush. The glue is water soluble. But there's a good chance I won't be able to rinse all of it out. Okay, so on to the painting process. So let's get started. Now that I can see it a little better, just to kind of update on what I did to the base, after I gave it a coat of flat black spray paint, I was able to see that there were some areas that were oddly smooth, because basically all the sand sank to the bottom of the glue mixture. And there were some areas that had some really nice texture to them. So what I ended up doing is, while I had it in my little spray booth, I gave it a heavy coat of black spray paint. I sprinkled on some more sand on the top to make sure that it had that fine sand texture. And then I gave it another coat of black spray paint. So now you can see that it does actually have a pretty decent amount of texture to it. And so, I mean, okay, I guess you can't see it great, but the texture is there. It's got a nice sandy look to it. And in most of the photos that I could find of SandTroopers on set, there's no noticeable like sand dune rippling at the scale that you would notice at their feet. And while I'm sure that happens in really fine sand, depending on the wind and everything else, like, it just doesn't seem right to me to have really small scale sand dunes. So I didn't like that. If you like that, feel free, obviously, to go ahead. You know, it's part of the kit. There's nothing wrong with it. But I think it looks a lot cooler to just kind of have it covered up. And once I kind of finish the rest of the painting,
I believe it'll actually look like natural sand. So that said, we've got to let that coat dry because that's pretty heavy and it was pretty wet. And I'm definitely going to need more of the Carrick Stone as the base to finish that. And then it's going to be essentially weathered with both Seraphim Sepia and Agrax Earthshade to kind of end up giving it a nice, hopefully varied look. And then I'll probably dry brush it at the very end with something like Ushabti Bone. So yeah, even maybe another color in there, maybe not just another dry brush of the Flayed One Flesh, which is going to be kind of mixed into this. So we'll see what happens. A lot of that's just going to be kind of on the fly and just how it feels at the time, because sand, there's no absolute, right? And with the whole Star Wars universe, I mean, this could be purple sand on an alien planet. It doesn't have to be Tatooine. So you can kind of take liberties with this and have artistic license to do really whatever you want. And then, you know, the figure can then be weathered with colors that match the sand color. So, you know, again, there's no absolutes to any of this. You can kind of do what you want. I'm going with more of the idea of a Tatooine look to it, just because it just, I don't know, it's simple. But colored sand might actually be really cool. And then if you're looking around at your local hobby store, in their craft section with all the sand colors that you can do for like the layered sand in glass, that's where I got my sand, and it's super cheap. So it's like £1.50 of sand for $4, which is going to let me do thousands of model bases rather than the little pots of, you know, sand texture kind of stuff from any given paint company, Vallejo, Citadel, whatever. It's far more expensive. I mean, this way, obviously, I've got to mix glue into it myself, but that doesn't seem all that hard, and it's going to still end up being far, far less expensive in the long run. So, again, either way, they've got a lot of different colors of sand if you want to go that way. But as that dries, we're just going to kind of keep moving on. And what I'm going to do is jump back and forth to different pieces. As one piece dries and it's hard to handle, I'll kind of work on another part. Now, the body actually doesn't need any painting. I think I'm going to do the leather pouch brown instead of black, but I might only do the shoulder pouch brown and leave this one black just to have some variety. But we'll see. Kind of cross that bridge when we get to it. For the most part, though, the body doesn't need any painting, only needs a bit of weathering. So we'll set that off to the side, and then I'll probably just start on the helmet here. Now, the blue that's going in there is going to be Techless blue, and I'm basically just going to kind of paint it over the top, and then I'll go over it with one of these. It's a pretty hard Q-tip, and I'll put a little bit of the Vallejo airbrush thinner in the Q-tip, and then that will take, because again it's hard, it'll take the paint off of the surface and leave it down in the crevices. So the blue ends up looking really good. That's exactly what was done for this guy. So it stays down in there quite nicely. So now for the shading and weathering process. I'll put them mostly back together because the backpack will actually give me a little bit to hold on to while I'm weathering the body. Otherwise, it wouldn't necessarily be bad to just leave the head off so I can hold on to the stump while I'm weathering the body. But I think the backpack, I can kind of weather it second, and I can use it to hold while I'm doing all the weathering and work on the body itself. So that should work out well. Then we can put on the shoulder pad. And the head. So there is going to be a way that I can actually get that arm down. There's a few poses in some movie shots where this arm hand is essentially just kind of the secondary hand in the weapon. Then he's got the big kind of bazooka cannon, whatever thing, with his hand coming across under. So we'll see if we can get him in that pose. Go from there. Otherwise, I think I may end up printing him. I think I'll be able to 3D print some of the binoculars that those guys hold, and these hands should actually hold the binoculars pretty well. So, as for weathering, the 4 shade paints that I'll be using from Citadel: Agrax Earthshade, Seraphim Sepia, Reichland Flesh Shade. I'll probably use that on just the leather. That's probably it. And Null Oil for the weapons. So I'll start with the base, because that I'm going to actually start with a layer of Seraphim Sepia to kind of yellow up the sand a little bit more, and then we'll darken it back a little bit more after that with the Agrax Earthshade. While that's still wet, I'm just going to add some of the Agrax. Alright, so I'm basically going to start on the feet and legs and work my way up. I backed the camera out a little bit, so I think we can see a little better, right? And based on reference photos, we really can't go too crazy with the weathering on this guy. So don't stress too much. We're just gonna start beating him up, and because it's just fresh plastic, I didn't prime it. It's going to kind of spot up at first, but don't worry about it. At least I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to keep splotching it around. And eventually, essentially, it just gets thin and starts to dry and stays where we want it. And we're going to put on a few layers. And then at the end, I'm going to see, I haven't done it before, but I believe I have some pigments, some old chalks and charcoals from when I was in college that I'm going to try using to do a bit more weathering around the feet and stuff. This is one of the fun things about the SandTrooper compared to a Stormtrooper, is just the ability to do all of this weathering.
And I am going to tone this back a bit. So I'm just trying to kind of get it everywhere. It ends up giving me some nice kind of edge detailing. And then I'll go back, just like I did with the blue parts of the face, the mask, and I will pull some of it back off so that I have a bit more control over where everything goes. But I definitely want it down in all the crevices. So this will probably take, a couple shots back and forth. I'm not going to go quite as crazy on the face mask. I kind of figure the farther up we go on the body, the less insane amounts of dirt there really should be. All right, now I am going to at least attempt to make my own weathering powders here. So I've got a few Conti crayons back from when I was in college. And we're just going to grind them on a little bit of sandpaper. Make ourselves, that one might be a little too rusty orange. It's a nice dirty brown. And then we have just some vine charcoal. That's a really, really nice black. Might be a little too intense, but it might be good for like some muzzle burn or that kind of thing. All right, so now we just take a dry brush. Let's see. Nice little. All right, and then just kind of splotch it on. So, and it definitely has a different look to it. I mean, it looks like dirty, dusty powder because, well, it is. So it's a good kind of later step. Now, one of the problems is that it rubs off easily.
So if you don't fix it in place, it will be able to be rubbed off pretty easily. So the downside to fixing it in place is that it does darken it and change the color a little bit. So I think that with all these kind of mixed together, and I will also put some of this onto the ground. Cake that into the breathing area a bit. Now, and for me, I'm going to leave it. I'm not going to be handling any of this a whole lot. You buy a couple Conti crayons, and you have weathering powders for a very long time. I've never purchased weathering powders from any of the big names, so I don't know what they cost, but I have to imagine that just grinding up a little bit of Conti crayon is going to end up being a lot less expensive. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe those weathering powders are actually super cheap and last a really long time. But if they're not super cheap and they don't last a really long time, then this is a great alternative. All right, so I think that's pretty good. Let me grind a little bit more black here. So I want to definitely get that in and around the muzzle here. And the parts that get handled quite a bit. All right, and finally, the base itself. Let's see, I don't know what color that is, actually. That's that was really dirty. Okay, that's a little too red. Some more of the brown. Some more of the yellow.
Dirty. All right, now I think he looks pretty fantastic. I don't think I'm gonna add any more weathering. I think the amount that I took off with the Q-tip and a little bit of airbrush thinner, I think he looks really good. So I like the amount of dirtiness on his legs and feet. All right, I think it actually works quite well without making him look just ridiculously over the top dirty, which isn't wrong. I mean, I like that too. Well, no, actually, I prefer this. It is definitely dirty, but to me, it actually feels like something that would be actually normal, or not necessarily normal, but probably happen to a stormtrooper, a SandTrooper, in between times when they could actually get their armor cleaned up. But I think, some of the levels of dirty I've seen, just not quite my taste, a little too much. All right, so now I'm going to have to take a few minutes to figure out how to get him posed. He does stand on the base, no problem, but I'm gonna have to basically take his backpack back off to put the leather pouch back on, and then figure out how to get him to hold that weapon. So once I get him posed, I'll be back. All right, well, here he is, all weathered, full of my homemade weathering powders. I think he turned out really, really cool. I really like the amount of weathering. I was actually able to get him posed into something that feels relatively reasonably like a shot from the movies. That actually doesn't look completely unnatural. At first, trying to get that arm holding the weapon into that position with the shoulder pack there was a bit of a challenge, but it's actually in a good spot now, and I think it's going to stay. So overall, really fun kit to build. Love doing the weathering. Please hit the like button. It actually helps make this video appear in other people's searches and come up as a recommended video. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, please hit that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.